You are listening to Arts on the Air, a bi-weekly-ish interview show dedicated to Savannah, Georgia's artists, musicians, and authors. Each episode will feature a guest in conversation about their philosophy, practice, and current projects, as well as their thoughts on the state of the arts in our community of Savannah. Our theme music is a clip of Summer Nights by the Eric Jones Trio. It's provided by our friend Mark Chesanow, who plays with the Eric Jones Trio. Hey everyone, welcome to Arts on the Air. This is Tamara Garvey, and I have the pleasure of sitting with local artist Erica Catherine today. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, Tamara. I'm so happy to be here.
So excited to talk to you. And just for a little background, Erica and I have known each other for a number of years, and we are both artists in a gallery on River Street, a co-op called Gallery 209. So we know each other quite well. We know each other's work quite well at this point. So very excited to really get down and talk to you about your process. Let me read a little bit from your bio. I like the way you describe yourself on your Instagram is vintage inspired designs for the old soul. And then your bio on your website is with a deep love for vintage art and design since she was a child, Erica aims to bring that special spirit to all of her art and products. Each is created using layers of watercolor and graphite to give an ethereal feeling that harkens back to turn of the century illustrations, which is lovely. So Erica was born in Savannah and you went to SCAD. Can you tell us a bit about how early on you actually were into art?
So that's kind of a funny story. When I was in later elementary and then through middle school, I actually injured my foot and I had to have 8 casts and 2 surgeries in the span of 4 years. So obviously, there's a lot of like downtime when you're just sitting around. So that's when I kind of found my love for like art and drawing. And then from there, I just continued to enjoy it more and more. I actually went to Savannah Arts, which I know you knew that. But I was going to audition for either violin or flute at the time because I played both. And I took a leap and decided to do art instead. So that was kind of like the pivotal moment. I decided I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for visual art instead of
Yeah.
music. So that's kind
Because
of really when it started.
you have to decide at the like audition stage which of those tracks you're going to.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to kind of decide. So there's, multiple different majors, and I was like, no, I think I'll enjoy it more if I did art. So
Well, you might know this, but I don't know her super well, but I think Frida Kahlo also like got into art because she was incredibly injured and was bedridden for a number of years, right?
I do remember reading about that in college.
Oh my gosh, so you're following in that tradition. That is quite a story.
It is, yeah, it's an interesting one. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, okay.
Okay,
It's like,
dark,
yeah.
yes. Um, so your high school years focusing on, is it drawing and painting and things in general? How did that go for you? Did it go smoothly? Were there a lot of like bumps along the road?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of learning curves, I think, for everybody when you're in high school. I don't think anyone ever has a really clear path in high school. I hope not, because that'll make me feel worse about myself, right? But so the interesting thing about Savannah Arts is you, like within the visual art department, they have tons of different stuff you can do. So when I was there, I did drawing and painting, you can do photography. Now they even have like fashion there and all sorts of stuff.
Oh
So you
wow.
get to learn a little bit about everything. I definitely gravitated more towards the like drawing side of it. And I also did like ceramics and fibers. It was just really fun. You got
Wow.
to experiment across the board with different types of art.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So it's kind of become like SCAD where there's all these very specific majors.
Yep.
And then was it just like a given that you were going to go to SCAD or were you thinking of moving to any other city?
So my mom actually went to SCAD as well. She studied interior design there and she is a kitchen designer. So I kind of grew up with that as like a background. So I knew in high school that I like really wanted to go to SCAD. It was like my dream school. I looked at going to like SCAD Atlanta, but the programs here at the time were just more like fleshed out. I feel like they had a lot more to offer here. So I decided to stay. And I'll be honest, it was actually really nice being home. Because there's nothing like coming home from a day of like exams and there being food in the kitchen already.
Yes, that is
My parents were like,
comfortable.
"We know we might not see you, but we left some food in the oven
Aw.
for you."
They just leave you a tray and you go to your little cave and work on your
Pretty
drawing.
much. Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Wow, so I guess your mom would have been in one of the really early classes at SCAD probably, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember exactly what year she started, but it would have been like earlier on in there.
Yeah.
like career of the school. So it
And
was pretty fun.
your degrees in illustration was,
Yep.
did you try other things before you moved into that?
No, I actually went straight into illustration.
Okay.
So I did minor in ceramics as well, which is a very interesting combo. People are always like, what was the I just really like ceramics, so I did
Yeah.
ceramics and illustration.
What do you think of as the differences between like illustration and painting as a field of study? I'm always curious about that because I too majored in illustration after trying
Yeah.
painting first.
I didn't know that you tried painting first. I feel like the illustration department focused, at least when I was there, now it's completely different, but when I was there, they focused mostly on stuff that was going into like production, if that kind of makes sense. So they were focusing more on like print and advertisement and book and that kind of vein. I try to describe it as the illustration differs from painting in the like SCAD realm, more based on if it's going to be used for something else other than just like a gallery space, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's
That's
a
kind
really
of
good
how
way
I
to
saw
put
the
it.
difference.
Yeah, I'm curious when it comes to people like me and you who majored in illustration but now have like fine art careers. Like we're not doing, editorial work or commercial
Yeah,
work or whatever. So in the end result is sort of the same, except that yeah, we both are a lot more focused on it's not necessarily just a painting you're selling, but that it turns into prints and
yeah,
cards and then even more products if possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
How did you, so your kind of signature media that you use, the layers of watercolor and graphite, at
Yeah.
what point did you arrive at that? Was that, because the first couple of years at SCAD, they're very overtly teaching you, like you're forced to use every different media and test them out and things. And then by the end, if you have something you really like, you can focus on it. But a lot of people by then are still not, like you still haven't really found your perfect thing. So,
This was kind of different. Like my process through SCAD was a little different because I took a lot of AP classes in high school. So when I started a little further along in my classes at SCAD than some of the other students did. So I guess the end of my freshman year and early into my sophomore year, I was already taking some of the illustration classes. And I found that I was using a lot of like ink and watercolor, and I did that prior to coming to SCAD. And I had a couple professors go, well, why don't you try like mixing in some like graphite and see like how it works? So it was kind of like ink, graphite, watercolor is what I used together, and then I just dropped the ink.
yeah, interesting.
And it just kind of developed from there.
I'm curious what if there was something about using the pen line and the ink that wasn't your jam as opposed to using the different softnesses of pencil.
I think a lot of it was because I did layer it for a while, as I felt like the graphite gave me a softer feeling that really offered what I was aiming to bring to my drawings, as opposed to like the darker ink work.
I think also, and people like you and I who are into just this whole realm of like the ink slash watercolor, that type of thing is really different than the like track of people who are into acrylic painting or oil painting, things like those. Did you ever enjoy
Yeah.
doing these things that were pure painting and not any drawing at all? I'm just curious because I sometimes dabble in that a bit, but I just really miss like doing some form of drawing, I feel like in every piece.
I totally agree with you. I found that I just didn't enjoy the process of like purely painting with specifically with oil and acrylic. I think just because it felt heavier to me, I didn't gravitate towards it as much.
Yeah, the paint goes down and it's opaque and it's like a real statement almost.
You're like, no, we went too far here.
Yeah, you have to back up a bit. Yeah, I think yeah, for me, I guess also I like either pencil or pen. I like doing just the aspect of the drawing. I feel like I like the best part of the piece and the filling in with the paint is just I do feel like I'm just laying down paint, like I'm just filling in just to create some spaces in there, but that it's the act of the drawing that I really enjoy most.
Well, and I think that's why, because I feel very similarly. And I think with most of my illustrations, I use really fine paintbrushes. So it's almost like I'm drawing with, because I do a lot more of like dry brushing.
Yeah.
It feels a lot more like drawing. And I think that's another reason why I gravitated like towards that more.
Yeah, and I think when people look at, of course, there's always post like a few images of your work in the Facebook post for this, but you don't tend to have big areas of any one painting that has a color. You have
No.
like tiny little spaces anyway, because you do a lot of maps. So it'll be like tiny little squares of green.
I just like to make myself crazy is really what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I want to talk about this, how you tend to do a lot of entire series where you have to commit to something and do an entire realm of things because not everybody works like that. So when you finished at SCAD in illustration, what year was that?
2016.
Okay. What were you imagining that you were going to be doing with your career at the point where you finished? What were you
So
wanting?
that is one of the things, like I do feel like my year, they were leaning more into making sure that we kind of focused on what we were wanting to do when we left. So I kind of knew going into it that I wanted to do freelance. I focused a lot more at the time on like surface pattern design, which I feel like still really carries through in a lot of my artwork. I feel like you can kind of see it. So I knew that I was gonna, try to get out there and license my work. I was gonna continue producing products with my drawings on it and that kind of thing. And that's basically what I did. I just worked jobs and built my business on the side.
Yeah. So you were never going for like getting your art in magazines and commercial work in general. You weren't going in that track.
No, because I had a hard time kind of when I started SCAD, specifically like the illustration department. I loved producing the illustrations, but I felt like I had a hard time fitting in. And I had a really, really wonderful professor, Linda Warner Constantino, and she did botanical illustrations and she focused on work for surface design. And she basically told me, Erica, it's okay if you don't produce work that's meant for editorial or book or, what was basically the main form of illustration that was being taught at the time. It's like
Yeah.
it is okay. It's a very valid field. You can go and just make pretty artwork because you want it to go on product. She's like, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. And I think that really gave me the permission to find my voice a little bit more. So luckily, I found her. I took a bunch of classes with her because she was the one who had the background in it at the time there, and it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, that's nice also if you had a professor who specialized in botanical that you weren't necessarily only with professors who were like nudging you to go into more of a painterly realm, which I feel like because most people are at the point where you were at school, it probably was going a lot digital as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, to have an actual professor who was more just with the same look of illustration you were, and so it wasn't somebody like pushing you to go into this other medium that's
And
more mainstream.
Yeah, and I did have a couple of other professors. Professor Vargo was really funny when I had my self-promotion class with him. He was like, because he was very much into the big, core of what the SCAD illustration department was at the time. And he was like, Erica, I don't get your artwork, but it's okay. It's marketable and I can help you do that.
Oh, I love
I
that.
was like, you don't have to get it. It's really like feminine. Men don't tend to gravitate towards it. I totally get it. You don't have to get
Interesting.
it. If you can just help me get there and prepare, the stuff that I need.
And yeah, Fargo, he was a professor when I was there too. And yeah, I guess he either is kind of it is very bold, it's very splashy. He's either
Yeah.
acrylic painting or he was doing pastels too. And he was
Mhm.
trying to get me to work with pastels. And I it was awful and I hated them and it was such a mess and there was chalk everywhere. And I was like, this is
I also don't like pastels.
horrendous.
Totally
Yeah.
don't judge you on that.
Yeah, I think maybe people like you and I, if you do pencil or pen work, I had just have this theory. It's the opposite of doing like a chalk pastel where we just can't handle if you work with it too much, it just the whole thing becomes gray and your hands are
It's
covered.
just blurry. Yeah. It's just,
Yeah. But yeah, not everybody likes our medium where you have to be very careful and delicate because
yeah.
you can't really cover up tons of mistakes super easily. So
Nope. It's there once it's there.
interesting. I'm curious. So nowadays in your work, you are open to custom pieces from people.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any commercial illustration jobs where you were working for someone else's vision and having to interpret that and like how smoothly that went? Because it's very different than just deciding you want to do a painting and then doing the painting.
So most of the like more commercial work I do is like licensing work. So they will pick out artwork that I already have created and either like they'll be like, "Oh, we want to change this color a little bit," or they're basically already buying the stuff that I've drawn. So normally when I do commission work, it's more on the like fine art side, not necessarily the illustration side, if that
Got it.
makes
Okay.
sense. So I get a lot of commissions for bridal bouquets. Like a lot of brides will come to me, sometimes the husbands too, and they'll want me to recreate a drawing of like their bridal bouquet. I get a lot of custom maps, but that's more of the artwork side, like custom that I get as opposed to the like commercial side.
Yes. That's interesting. I've never heard of anybody else doing bridal bouquet drawings, but I totally get that. So someone just sends you photos of the bouquet and then you just draw their beautiful bunch of flowers.
Yeah, it's really
Cool.
fun.
I like the idea of that also that it's post-wedding because when I first graduated SCAD and I was trying to sell on Etsy, and the big way to like really become a big seller on Etsy and make money is was to work with brides and do custom wedding invites and custom paper products for that. And I always from the beginning was like, nope, absolutely not. I do not want to work with people who are preparing for their wedding because they would be super stressed out. Time would be a
Yeah.
huge crunch. I just did not want the stress, even though it was potentially a lot of money. But your
Yeah.
way of doing it, where it's just a drawing of a photo after the wedding, is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it works out really well. And I mean, I have not had a complaint so far. I really just I work off of the photo. I make it,
Yeah.
fit and feel nice on the page. You're working from reference at that point, but it's fun. I enjoy it. And it's like a nice way to kind of fill in kind of like personal work as well.
Yeah, that's very sweet. Okay, so you graduated in 2016, and then I joined at Gallery 209, which is that co-op on River Street that we're both in 2020. I think you joined
Yeah.
the same year.
Yeah, I think you joined in the spring, didn't
I was
you?
in the summer. I was when they
Okay.
reopened after COVID in the summer.
I joined in August. I think I joined just a couple of months after you.
Okay. So for those 4 years in between, because that's when I'm assuming your career like really kicked into high gear with and having to like produce prints and cards all the time. Before that, had you already kind of moved from just doing original paintings to also producing like prints and cards and products already? How did you start?
Yeah, and I had actually like started that earlier in college. So, and that was before a
Oh,
lot of the print on demand stuff. So I was having to get fabric printed and sent to me, and I was making the product. Yeah, so I was sewing scarves and tote bags and tea towels because that really was kind of before the beginning of the print on demand being more accessible. At that point, it was you had to get it produced in large batches. So I was doing that on the side, and then I was also teaching. So I teach classes occasionally at the Jepson Center, and I was an intern there in high school and all through college. And then I started teaching classes there after I graduated from college, which was really fun. And I also taught and was a manager at a DIY shop downtown in Savannah. So I did that alongside running my business for that like 4 year period
yeah.
before I joined the gallery. And as I'm sure you can relate to, joining Gallery 209 is like a big lifestyle change. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the point where I was able to COVID changed how my management job was going anyway. A lot of businesses were closing. We decided to go more like in-person events. So we weren't hosting at our workshop space anymore. So that was kind of an easy transition. That kind of faded off slowly. And then I ramped up with my business at the
This
same
is
time.
the DIY shop that you taught at, you mean?
Yeah,
And what place is that? Are they still open?
they're not still open. It was AR Workshop. We were
Okay.
down on Liberty.
Okay. That's cool also that you were able to just start teaching at the Jepson so young as well. That's great. Was it both
Yeah.
kids and adults? How'd that go?
Yeah, so it was mostly kids when I was in high school and college. I helped with a lot of the classes that were in the camps that were for the kids. And then I ran the studio like Saturdays. So I was there. I'd help the kids like would come in and want to make some art. So I would help with that. Kip Bradley is still there, and he was one of the big like proponents of me being able to stay there because I was there. He started like I think a year before I started as an intern. And he really helped me like lean into working in the studio there. So
Yeah. Do you remember in this era, like going out to gallery openings much downtown and like kind of getting out there and trying to meet people and trying to explore all the galleries and things? Was that part of your
I
like,
did a lot of the markets. So the like first Fridays when they like started, this would have been 2012, 2013. So that's kind of where I like started to dip my toe in and get out there and meet people. I met a lot of like shop owners.
how soon, when you first started making your own prints and cards, were you getting them printed elsewhere? And then at some point you bought your own printer and started doing it from home? How was that process for you?
It started, I had just a tiny little like office home printer. I started with that with the cards and the prints, and then I went up from there.
Yeah.
I found every time I tried to get them printed somewhere else, I just wasn't happy with how they looked. I'm sure you can also relate to that.
Yeah, because you can't like give them your own paper that you want to use. You're at the mercy
Mm-mm.
of whatever paper they have. And yes, sometimes the colors aren't exactly what you want.
Mm-mm. And I just find that the matte paper works a lot better with my drawings. And a lot of places, when you go to get matte paper, it's either really, really thin or it just doesn't, they just don't have it. A lot of places you can only get glossy printed and it
Right. They're
just,
not going to have like, it's almost like recreating watercolor paper, what yours are.
yep.
Yeah, I find also, I don't know about you too, but now that we've been doing this for a number of years, I have like a certain number of years that I get out of each printer and you become pretty good at like little things will go wrong and you have to like poke around on YouTube and figure out how to, sometimes it gets clogged up. We have to open the printer up and like dab at it with Q-tips and paper towels and like mop stuff up. And then you can like buy yourself some more time with the printer and eventually you just need a new printer. I don't know if you've had this
Yes.
experience too.
So, and I love, I don't know what printer you have, but I like Epson printers a lot. And my last one actually decided that it like got to the end of its print life and it basically gave me a warning. It was like, we're done. This was before they had like the collection tank. So the ink just literally like any of the like off ink that came off, it would empty into the little sponge at the bottom. And basically when that was full, the printer was like, no, I'm done. I'm dead. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh,
Yeah. There's a
okay.
sponge that just like collects runoff inside the
Yep.
printer.
The new one I have though has a collection tank, so it goes into the sponge and then into the collection tank, so you can just replace the collection tank, which is much better.
Do you do it where you have that continuous ink supply or are you using cartridges?
No, I'm using cartridges. I did
Okay.
have the like a refillable one on my last printer, but this one has been harder to find the cartridges for, and I'll be really honest, I'm a little nervous about refilling it on this one because I don't want to kill my printer.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes they can die shortly after you use those systems.
Really? Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're like really dorking out over the printers, but I I feel like on my next one, maybe I want to look for one that, like you're describing, that has the sponge in a separate place because that is always the thing that messes up inside it. There, it always is like you're needing to do a big print run because you get an order for something, and then that's when the printer always just conks out, and you're
It
like
just smells fear, is
crawling
what it
around.
does.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I'm like crawling around on my knees, like dabbing inside it with Q-tips and like toilet paper to
Mhm.
like sop up
You're
interior
like, please
spills or
work, please
something. It's
work.
absolutely wild. Yeah. All right. So in that period between 2016 and 2020, you were doing your own products, you were doing craft shows, you were doing teaching. Did you frequently have a point, like moments in your craft shows where you were surprised that things sold really well or surprised that something didn't sell well? I've found both.
Both, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, it's always interesting to see, especially if it's a new product that you haven't done before, to see if it's received how you expect it to or not. Sometimes you're very surprised and not in a good way.
Yeah. Are there entire products that you don't sell anymore, or are there some products that work but only with particular art on them?
So both of those things, there are definitely, so as I said, I still sell the scarves, but I have someone else who makes them now. I use print-on-demand companies for them. I used to sell a lot of tea towels. I really don't sell those as much. They were a really big thing in, I would say like 2012 to 2016. It was a majority of what I sold. I sold those better than prints. And before I joined Gallery 209, my products actually sold better than my prints did. And now it's kind of reversed, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
I can't really like pinpoint why that is now. I don't know if it's just because I offer more prints than before, but
I do feel
that's the
like there
majority of what I
was,
sell
it's
now.
funny you mentioned that there was a moment where tea towels were, it was just like a trendy item. And if you were going to a housewarming or something, it was an easy thing to buy for someone.
It was like a lot of housewarming, like birthday presents. And I do still sell a lot of gifts. So people who are looking for birthday presents, baby showers, all sorts of stuff. I would say probably 90% of what I sell, someone is buying for somebody else, which
Yeah.
is really touching. I really like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see what people pick for gifts.
I get various things made and they don't necessarily sell super fast, but I like keeping a few of them around because I do think it is nice to
Yeah.
have products. So I've had I get a few of my paintings made into trinket trays. I
Mhm.
carry a couple of different coffee mugs, and then I'm getting more into stickers because it's a small price point, so it's not a lot of money, but it's extremely easy to just like reorder from the same sticker
Yep.
company and over again. And they do just all the time you sell like a little bit of it.
Yeah, I sell a lot of stickers too, locally. And I have a lot of like the state maps and stickers.
Yeah.
And then I always like throw in a sticker for like if you order through my website, like I'll throw one in. If the specifically if it's coming from me, so like if I'm selling a print or whatever, I'll like throw it in there as a
Oh,
little
that's nice to
good
know. Okay,
goodie.
so
Yeah.
everybody just so you know, if you order from her on her website, you'll get a free sticker in there.
You
Um,
don't know what it is though. I'll never tell you. It's a surprise.
so let's talk about your actual imagery that you paint. So you do this interesting thing where you will do an entire series. So you've painted an image that's like every single state flower,
Yeah.
and then you can sell a particular print of that state with the flower like dropped in as a pattern, and then you can also sell it big as like a map of the
Mhm.
entire country, and every single state has your little flower dropped in. You've done these hand illustrated maps of downtown Savannah, and so they're very, very tiny and laborious. You've done a thing where you've painted like every butterfly, where you've painted every horoscope. How early on did you get into where this is your realm of creating art?
I really and honestly think it started when I started focusing on the surface design at SCAD because they want you to build collections because that's what sells. Specifically, if you're looking at like fabric, they want a grouping of different patterns and different imagery that all go together. So I think that's kind of how it started. And then it just snowballed where it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it almost feels like it's a big goal for me. I like having this really large task that I feel like I can tackle bit by bit. It's very rewarding at the end when it's done, but sometimes it can take a really long time.
Yeah, is was the longest running project, I guess, all of the state flowers?
Yes, yeah, because for that one, I illustrated all of the flowers and colored all the flowers. Then I did the patterns, and the reason I did the patterns was I had a fabric company that was going to purchase the license from me to be able to produce them onto fabric. The license fell through, unfortunately, but it did help me like push through to finish making that collection.
Yeah.
So then after I did the patterns, I did all the states and the big state map. So it was like a year of work
Yeah, I was going to
from
ask,
like start to
that
finish.
entire thing
Yeah.
was a year.
Yeah.
Would you be working on other things at the same time in between, or do you just
Oh,
like
yeah.
put your nose down and do one thing? Okay.
No, I definitely do other projects. I basically, when I'm doing a really large project right now, so I basically keep it on my drawing desk. I keep it pushed back towards the like back of my large drafting table. And then when I don't have something that's more pressing, I bring it forward and I work on it. So I basically just bounce back and forth.
And then you did a series where you've illustrated each horoscope sign. Was that
Yeah.
like a request? Did you have somebody in your life who really likes astrology, or how'd that come about?
No, I just kind of thought of it. I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to do this and offer something that was really personal. I like going into building information about the subject matter that I'm using. So it was really fun to like research it. I researched all of the like flowers and the colors and the mythology behind each zodiac sign, and then made it. So that was
Yeah,
just
so
kind of
each
an
one
idea.
has little hints within it, like very
Yeah.
internally cohesive, I guess. You've also done where you've illustrated each letter of the alphabet, and then with the corresponding, is one with like animals and one is with a plant?
Yeah, so I have two different series, and I started with the floral one, and it's all different like flowers with an insect with it. So butterflies, ladybugs, all kinds of stuff. And then I kept getting asked for like a boy type alphabet. And I was like, "Ah, I don't know." And then I was pregnant with my daughter last year, and I was like, I really want to do a woodland one. I was like, I think it'll fill the request that I've been getting for something that was like more boy. I don't feel like it's heavily masculine by any means, but it was a really fun project to tackle when I was pregnant, especially. It was
Yeah.
very meaningful. But yeah, that one's got all different like woodland creatures, and then it's
Yeah.
got a plant with it.
Yeah, so each one that you do, it I like the way that you work. It does generate a ton of different finished pieces, which is cool.
Yeah.
So you have a finished, like a big poster where it's every single letter looking at it, and then people can do like you can sell it as every single individual letter as a big poster, or people can do a custom thing where you spell out their entire name, which is cool. How big a proportion is doing custom work for people?
I would say it totally depends on the season, honestly. So during the spring and the fall, I get a lot more custom work. And I would say at that point, the print production specifically, like the custom names and things like that, are probably 30% of the work. So it's not like a huge portion of it. A lot of people, and I think it's because I already offer so many items that are already really personal. I feel like that's one of the reasons I don't get more custom work.
Yeah.
But honestly, it makes it a little bit easier for me if it's already done because I just have to print it at that point and wrap it and send it off.
Yeah, I mean those custom name ones is it's really brilliant because of course people are gonna like spend a good amount of money for it as a custom thing, but you've
Yeah.
already done all the work, so you're kind of just
It's just assembling
you're
it.
photoshopping.
I'm just, yep, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
right in
Yeah.
Photoshop. I line it up, make sure it looks pretty, and send it off for them
In,
to
I know in
take a
general, I
look
don't know
at.
if you feel this way too, but as people who sell prints and cards, it's like such an amazing product because you've already done the work, you've already done the painting. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an incredible, if we're gonna say business model.
Drew always jokes, my husband, he always jokes that it's like I'm printing money. He's
Incredible.
like, you already did the hard
Yeah.
part.
On your website in the fabric section, you have these companies that you reference called Raspberry Creek Fabric and Real Fabric. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so they're similar to Spoonflower is like the big one that a lot of people know, but they're also other US based printing companies and they do print on demand fabric. So it's kind of similar to doing Spoonflower where you put your, designs up and people can purchase wallpaper or fabric with them. So it's cool. It's nice, like a nice little sprinkling of some extra commissions.
Yeah.
And by no means do I sell tons of stuff on them, but it's a nice way to get out to other markets because people might not necessarily, buy from one site compared to the others.
Yeah, I was really curious about that. I've always been looking to get more into licensing and on
Mhm.
products and things, and I wasn't really aware that there was a way to put your things up for like wallpaper specifically.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a really big artwork in order to be turned into wallpaper? How does that work?
So not necessarily. I actually recently did a custom wallpaper design where someone who has a house in downtown wanted the florals from my bird girl painting. And the original painting is like 11 by 14. So the flowers are pretty small. And when I scan my originals, I just scan them in at a larger DPI. And that allowed me to blow it up a little bit. So I didn't have to worry about it being really blurry. I will say that when the fabric and the wallpaper gets printed, it's always a little bit softer, like drawing wise, than what you would see if it's a print production. I'm
You're
sure you
looking at,
probably have run into that with like tote bags or other stuff. If you had
right,
those printed, they always look different than the
not a crisp copy.
original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What computer program do you use to turn something into a repeat pattern? And
Photoshop.
okay, okay.
And it's way easier than it used to be. They actually now have a repeat pattern like filter. So you can actually see as you move it around on the page what it'll look like on the full pattern. Before you had to do a lot of math and geometry to make it work,
Yeah.
because you basically had to like make a file with the images in the middle and then like cut it in quarters and then fill it in and then
Yes.
save that and cut
You had to
it.
move, you had to like duplicate the image and move it
Yes.
around to put it in this like ladder position.
And your poor Photoshop files were always gigantic
Yeah.
because you had to have so many files to be able to do it. Now it's way easier,
Okay, you're
so
blowing
much
my mind. I
easier.
did not know there was a filter in there that would do repeat patterns. It's pretty incredible.
Look up some, I'm sure YouTube probably has some videos. Look it up. It's really, really cool. Or you and I can hop on sometime and I can show you real quick.
I love that. Yeah, I've always wanted, I feel like licensing is like this holy grail where theoretically some huge company likes your image and then they're just printing it on like a shower curtain every year and you're literally just like getting some money. I've never been able to,
It
do you have anything in this realm going on for you?
So I had a license at the beginning of the year, and it's definitely not the company licensing is not as big a portion of my business as it was in previous years. A lot more of it now is like the print on demand because I can market it a little bit better than some of the other businesses. But it's also due to specifically this year, I've found that a lot less people are licensing due to like the tariffs and stuff. It's making a lot of companies more hesitant on bringing on new artists because they want to make sure if they're going to sell a product and produce it, it's going to
Yeah.
sell.
Ugh,
So they're
yeah.
sticking with a lot of the same
Yeah.
licensees.
I'd only in the past, I had tried Spoonflower years and years ago when it was new. And yeah, where you'd upload your art and you would, like you said, order a certain portion of fabric for yourself. And then I wasn't ever like making it into products. I was just cutting it up and selling it as like fat quarters to people who did want fabric. But it was impossible to really get anywhere because you would have to sell it at so much more expensive than people just buying it from Joann's Fabric or whatever. And I
Yeah.
never figured out there never seemed to be like a good way to like get your business to go in that direction.
I think people have to be looking for really bespoke
Yeah.
designs.
Yeah.
I think people have to be very intentional on what they're looking for. And the way I look at it is if they're not looking for that, then they're probably not the target market
Yeah.
for that product.
But this way, I guess that you found that Spoonflower, and then there's other two sites you mentioned where you can upload your art and the person can just order the fabric themselves. At least that does cut out the upcharging of the middleman.
Yeah, I mean, you get the commission that you get, and that's much more in line with the like licensing side of,
Yeah.
so you don't have to worry about, because that's a lot of the reason that I just put the stuff up on their site specifically, because I don't have to worry about the cost production, the markup to be able to make it worthwhile to cut and package those things
Right.
anymore. You're really just kind of getting the percentage that you would get.
I've only ever dabbled a small amount in those sites like Vistaprint or Zazzle where you upload some art and it's just sitting there and at any moment people can order like a mug or a t-shirt with your art because it's such a insanely tiny amount of money. And that every so often you get an email and you're like, someone bought a mug and you get 70 cents, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not much by any means,
Yeah.
but the way I look at it is specifically the like Spoonflower is probably my largest one.
Okay.
The way I look at it is the art sits there, people like it, they save it, and then, in the future, the money, it's not specifically mind-blowing amounts of money for me, but
Right.
it's a little bit here and there, and it does build up to be like make a difference at the end of the year.
I guess I just have them sitting there for every so often someone will write to me and want a print that's bigger than 11 by 14, which is the size that I print. And I can be like, here's a link, you can order it as a poster
Yeah.
from this place.
Yeah.
As far as your daily life, what proportion of the time are you actively painting something versus just either like making prints and cards or doing other businessy tasks?
One of the more interesting parts, I mean, besides my daughter being absolutely fantastic, my days look a lot different than they used to even a year ago. And now the nice thing about having Holly, besides her being fantastic, she's wonderful. I love her. She's 9 months old and she is the light of my life. But it's made me a lot more intentional on my business and on my drawing. So I'm actually able now to draw more than I was last year. And a lot of that is because I have had to refocus and look at what's taking me the most amount of time, what I can cut out, and being intentional on the time that I'm spending. Because in reality, I have about 4 hours a day that I can spend working, and that's about it because I'm a full-time caretaker too. So it's what I normally do is once a month, I have a week of production. So I take that entire week pretty much. I make sure my studio is backstocked with all the things that I might need in the next month. I ensure that all of my local shops have all of the stuff that they need. I do all my inventory. And then the rest of the month, I get to spend where I need it. So if I have a special project, I'll plan it in. If I'm working on, a specific drawing, I'll work on that. And then if I have something come up, like let's say I have a really large order that I wasn't anticipating, I can fill in as needed. So
Interesting.
this year, I would say probably a good 60% of my time now is drawing, and the rest is maintenance, which is a lot larger of a drawing portion than it was last year and even the previous years because I was so much more worried about, what's going on social media. I was worried about, making sure my products are all up to date. I was doing that kind of thing.
Mm.
And now I'm having to kind of retool the business side. So I have to touch less things and do less things. And it's a little bit more self-sustaining.
That's so interesting. You have a whole week where you just print and do all your
Yeah.
production 1 week. I don't do that at all. It's like I'm almost literally every 2 or 3 days, I'm printing something out, basically.
So what I do, and I think a lot of it is I'm, as you know, very organized. I like things where I like them. And so what I normally do is I have right back there in my closet, I have a gigantic backstock. I normally have of the prints that I sell more often between two and four. quantities of each. So that way, most of the time when I'm doing like restocks, I just pull from that. And then if I need to sprinkle in a couple extra, I'll do that. And then the rest of the week is just printing out extras to put back in my back stock.
Okay.
And that really allows me to not, I just spend that week to do it. And
Yeah.
the rest of the month is mine to spend as I need it.
Because I don't know about you, I guess the weirder part for me, like the in-person things are more regular and I know what to do, but I'll get like a random Etsy order, a random website order, and they don't come through a lot, so I'm not like printing a lot in advance, and it'll be some random thing you don't have sitting around. So
That does happen. And there is probably, I would say, like once a week, I'll have to sprinkle in doing something that I wasn't expecting to have to do. Like, as
yeah.
you said, like, packaging orders, I still normally need to do that about once a week. But the amount of time that that is weekly is pretty slim. The rest of the time, it's in that one big week.
When you were saying since your baby that you've had certain tasks that you've just backed off on completely, is social media, do you feel like you've overtly you're just like
It's
not
just
even focusing on?
yeah, I mean, it was one of those things, and I feel bad because I do really want to, show my process, be intentional about, sharing what's happening online. But it's just one of those things that it felt exhausting before having her, and trying to now and like work it in to the amount of time that I have just feels even harder.
Yeah.
I'm sure one day I will probably get back to it, but in this phase of life,
Yeah.
it's not happening.
I totally understand that. What do you do when you don't feel motivation for working and or painting specifically?
Oh, that I feel like is a question that every artist probably feels to their core. A lot of what I do, I feel like if I can keep myself moving, I'll find the inspiration to work. So normally if I'm like, I'm just really not feeling like, let's say that I need to get some prints done and I'm like, I'm just really not feeling it. I'll focus on a different task. Or I have a pretty big garden outside.
Hmm.
So I'll be like, oh, I'll go do that. I don't like sitting still. My daughter doesn't either. So that's also been interesting. Where Drew and I both look at each other and we're like, we don't know who she got that from.
It's amazing.
So, I mean, I feel like just finding something else to focus on really helps. And
Yeah.
then I'll come back to it. I'll be like, okay, I'm ready to do that now.
And I guess since you have such a young baby, you're like it's set hours per day that you have to get the work done or that's it. It's not like you can
Yeah.
just like dip in at night if you're a night owl type of thing.
I'm not a night owl. I am definitely a morning person. So I normally wake up early. I get a little bit of work done, and I feel like that helps me center my day. I feel like I'm ready to go by the time she's ready to wake up. And normally she gives me like a morning nap. We're down to two naps a day now. So my morning nap is normally the one that's longer, and I can go and work about 2 hours. And then by the time her afternoon one rolls around, I'm like, I gotta sit down for a little while.
Yeah,
Like
thank
I've been going since like 5:30. I need to take a little snooze.
well, this is perfect. Thanks for putting me into her
Of
morning
course.
nap
Thank
time.
you for being flexible because she's been an interesting little bug lately.
Yeah.
We fit this right in though.
We
She's
did.
still napping too, which is great.
What do you have coming up for you as far as either like venues you want to get into selling or different actual like content you want to be painting? What are we looking ahead toward?
So I am actually working on my biggest project ever right now. I started, and I haven't like announced this anywhere, so you are very special to be able
We
to
got the
hear about
scoop.
it. Yeah, you're getting to skip, and I've talked about it a little bit. I think I've mentioned it to you before, but this year I am working on, and I did some last year. I'm working on a large I Spy alphabet book. So it has all sorts of plants and insects and little creatures. And I do them on a double page spread. So I've been working on that. So it's like the letter A, and it's got a bunch of different plants and stuff on there. And on the other side of the page, it'll have like a little key where you can find the plant or the insect and then search for it on the other side of the page. That's what I've been working on. I just started design it in college. I'm sure you probably also had to take the book illustration class.
Yes.
And I like designed it. I never finished it. It was only like halfway done. So I brought it back to life. I'm
Oh
completely
boy.
redoing it.
Like
Um,
you look back at
so
your old files and you were like, this is not going to cut it. I need to re soup this
I
up.
was like, no, we're gonna do better. We're going bigger and better. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to self-publish it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just like working through it right now. I'm hoping that
Yeah.
I'll be able to announce it closer to the end of the year. I'm actually wrapping up the last few like sketches and transferring them onto the final. So I've started to
Oh,
work
that's great.
on the final
Close
illustration.
in.
So it's getting there. It is a big.
Yeah. Do you know already what site you're going to use to do the publishing and on laying out and all that?
No, I'm going to keep looking. I know there's quite a few different ones, and I think it'll come down to when I order, the books themselves, like when I go to do a test run to see which site I'm gonna prefer.
Yeah.
Because I know there's tons of them now. Before there was only like I think three when I originally designed it. Now there's a lot more places.
That's super exciting. Were there any specific paintings you did in this that you really enjoyed or any that like really challenged you in a wild way or
I drew a banana spider, and it's actually the first time I've drawn a spider, and it was very interesting. It is, I've drawn a lot of frogs too, which I had, like, I've only drawn a few. I drew a toad last year for the woodland alphabet. So that was also like an interesting shape. I find that sometimes shapes of like little creatures throw me off a little. I'm like, why do your legs look like that?
like doing the toad was really different than doing the frog?
It wasn't specifically different, but like they're just like interesting. Their legs, when you go to draw them, are very
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know if you've had to draw one, but
No, as you're saying this, I'm like, I've literally never looked at a frog or a toad. I can imagine zooming in on a photo and being like, that's what it looks like. Because yeah, I bet they're really weird.
drawing birds always throw me off a little bit too. I don't know why it is. I've drawn chickens before, and I drew birds for my woodland scene.
Yeah.
Where their legs connect to their body always throw
Yes.
me off too. I'm like, I don't,
The
that
angle
looks
of the leg
weird.
coming out of the body, and then there's like a sharp turn, and then the angle of the leg changes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I'm
And then
glad
their
that you
little
can
like
relate to that.
and then their little talons becomes
Yes,
different angles from that as well.
all the little things you wouldn't think about. And you're zooming in, and you're like, that, why is nature this way?
Why is nature? It's very weird. I remember in SCAD when you do self-portraits that just having to look really hard at yourself also sometimes is just horrendous.
You're like, why are we doing this project?
So for people who, like I said, I'll of course publish a link to your Instagram, a link to your website, and then some photos to go along with this on Facebook. If people want to shop your work around town, can you tell us where they can go for that?
Yeah, so you can go down to Gallery 209. You can also see Tamara's work while you're there. And then the other two shops that I am in are Locally Made Savannah, which is just right down on Broughton, and then Super Bloom Savannah, which is over in the like DeSoto Row area.
Yes, Garland.
So
Yeah, it's a great
yeah.
place. Yeah, and I guess we didn't even touch on your maps, but you do a couple specific maps of different like regions around Savannah, and one is downtown, is one the islands.
Yeah, so I've got all sorts of different ones. So I have downtown, I have Victorian District, I've got Midtown area, I've got South Side, I have even Windsor Forest and Coffee Bluffs. I've
Like a
got I
real
Love
local.
Hope. It's like, yeah,
I feel
I'm
like
like, I
only a
want all
local
the locals.
would ever draw these neighborhoods. I love it.
The only one I haven't done is Pooler.
I mean, they're perfect gifts for another local who isn't going to be seeing like maps of Coffee Bluff or whatever around.
Yeah,
Every time when I look close up at one of your hand-drawn maps, the first time I saw it, I just was like, Erica, bless your heart. God, who
I
on
know.
an exercise in insanity drawing that thing?
When I did specifically like the downtown ones, the all the other ones are fine, but all of the little squares in like the Victorian and the downtown district, my eye was twitching. I was like, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah.
I continuously do these things to myself. I don't know why.
I felt like that. I was so proud at the end of painting Wormslow Tree Avenue,
Yeah.
the arduousness of doing all the tiny branches and leaves. When I was done, I was like, oh my God, that was like a marathon.
Feel like never doing this again.
I am curious, so of all the artists at 209, like so your work it's kind of interesting that you have a drawing of the bird girl, but I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of the only Savannah scene you've drawn. And I was curious how come you hadn't done like Forsyth Park or Wormslow or something since you do so much botanical imagery.
I think a lot of it is one, at the gallery specifically, we have a lot of artists who already draw a lot of the scenes. And I prefer to draw. the icons, so like the Bird Girl and Forsyth Park and stuff like that, and put them into the map because it's a different take than what a lot of our other artists have. One, I don't want to step on toes. Two, it's just not what I enjoy as much, which I'm sure is interesting considering the type of work I do. But every time I've done it, I haven't. I enjoyed the Bird Girl. It was like a big enough step outside of my comfort zone that it was fun.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, I've just been kind of like, oh, I mean, there's a bunch of art like it. And of course, it's different than what the other artist would show stylistically. But if you're going to look for a Savannah scene, you're probably going to choose one of our artists that are more famous for doing them.
All right, just wondering. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Well, it's been super nice to get to chat with you and really just learn
Yeah.
more about your process. And you're so smart business-wise. You're very organized, which I feel like is just a huge, equally, if not more, aspect to being able to do your art full time the way you and I are, beyond the
Yeah.
actual drawing.
I don't think it's something that people think about when they're thinking about jumping into a, career doing art full time. It's a lot more than just making the art, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think all of us would enjoy to just be able to do that portion of it, but you just can't.
Any kind of final things you want to leave us with about your entire life of being an artist in Savannah? It's very cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I I enjoy every day. I mean, it's a pleasure and it is quite the experience to be able to work for yourself and work full time as an artist. It's something I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. This has been really fabulous. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Oh, so everyone, this has been local artist Erica Catherine, and this is Tamara Garvey with Arts on the Air, and thank you so much for listening.